Good morning. It's 9:02 on Wednesday, November 13th, 2024. Um, Today we will be going over the 2025 annual budget. I believe Emily will be presenting.
I will be taking the lead, and Emily will certainly correct me and add anything I may miss.
All right, with that, Kathleen, we will hand it over to you.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Council. This morning is the 2025 annual budget work session with the recommendations to Council. If you can go to the next slide. We'll be going over succinctly the budget process, the summary and the challenges that we're facing, the recommendations before you, the property tax levy recommendations, and then hoping to receive feedback and answer any questions council may have. Go ahead. Give me just 1 moment, please. Okay. The chair should be coming on shortly. We're going to help him. So just to go over some of the roles and responsibilities, there's a lot of stakeholders that are included and involved in the budget process. The advisory boards and commissions is like our mental health sales tax and the public safety sales tax. So they review any requests coming forward, and then anything that comes out of those advisory commissions as a recommendation does get forwarded to council. The budget office actually manages and leads the entire process throughout the county, produces all the reports, and works with all the departments and offices as well as myself and council. The departments and elected offices are the experts. These are the leaders in their organizations. They share the requests that they need to sustain, expand, or change their services that they provide. The finance team includes the deputy treasurer, the finance director, the budget director, the deputy county manager, and the HR director. Those with the finance background, they do look at all of this with their specific lens, and there are differing lenses on that team, so their input is also very valuable. Once the submissions are sent to the budget office and myself, we meet with all the departments and offices to understand their process. And then after we understand that and review financials, that's how I develop our recommendations that will be before you today. And of course, the council sets policy, including adopting the annual budget. The county does use a traditional budget approach that focuses on transparency, communication, and collaboration in order to optimize resource allocation. Every year, we start with our baseline budget and then make adjustments moving forward. Again, all departments and offices can request new requests or changes through this process through a change decision package. And any change that has financial impact or FTE impact has to come to council for approval. This is a very lengthy process. It feels like we're close to doing budget year round, but not quite. This starts in late spring, early summer, where the departments start analyzing and figuring out what do they need. Then the submissions are published. They were published in October. After there's a lot of work that happens before they're submitted, the budget office does validate all of the requests, the coding, the numbers, making sure everything is teed up. After it was submitted, we did again meet with all the departments and offices. We just focused on new requests because of the number of requests that have come forward, and that's what I'll be doing today as well as we move forward with the process. The recommendations were published on November 5th. Today is our work session. And then we do have a public hearing scheduled on December 2nd and 3rd. And just a reminder, on December 2nd is the opportunity for our elected officials to present any information that they want to council directly. And then the 3rd will be the official public hearing when public can also provide testimony. Some of the recommendations that are being brought forward to you today address urgent and immediate needs. The considerations as listed there that were taken into account is the continued pressure on our major funds, especially the general fund, the impacts of increased demand for services, new mandates, and I would say new unfunded mandates, rising costs, inflation. We look at what is feasible. We maintain appropriate reserves by policy. Council has been approving fund balance policies for all of our major funds. We want to minimize the impact to services and address critical needs. Preservation of our general fund is not only good practice, it's also pursuant to our policy. The property tax levy options are listed there as being recommended. They include the 1% for general fund, the road fund, conservation futures, parks, and then bank capacity also for conservation and parks. The increased sales tax revenue will continue to be projected at a 4.2% increase. And then the expense request, and you can see them there, is the planning code is about 3.3 million. REIT 1 is around 3 million. Mental health sales tax, 13.5, ARPA, 7.4, public safety sales tax, 489,000, and then the road fund at 6.8 million. We continue to strive to maintain public safety, infrastructure, and services in the county. This, with that said, like many governmental jurisdictions, our revenues are not keeping pace with our rising costs. The rising costs include our salaries, benefits, cost of goods and services, inflation, and others. Our major revenues are stable, which is like property tax, sales tax, but they're not growing at the same rate as our expenses. This continues to put a strain on the balancing our budget while maintaining service quality. What are we doing to address this challenge? As council has heard, this is our structural deficit, which is simply our expenses are exceeding our revenues, has been part of our general fund discussion for many years. We were lucky over COVID where we had the one-time ARPA funding, CARES Act funding that helped offset that. And we also had a huge increase in our sales tax. Unfortunately, one-time funding is not sustainable long-term. And the sales tax revenue is coming back in normal where it has leveled off. We have looked, and I would give, again, credit to our finance team, Sarah Lowe, Mark Gassaway, and Emily specifically, of looking at one-time revenues to be able to present a balanced budget for 2025. Some of these examples you did hear at our hearing last week as well as the exhibit hall revenue, public utility privilege tax, and then our capital bonds and the issuance that we had just completed. We continue to also look at cost saving measures, either through reductions of our expenses, looking at operational efficiencies. And as I've mentioned before, we have not grown in people in many years in the county. So we're trying to, with a growing county population, we're trying to keep up. But I would say many, if not all of our departments should have additional staff. We just don't have the funding to support that. We will be taking an intentional and strategic approach in 2025 with council starting in early 2025, probably in January, to discuss policy priorities and preparation for not just the 2026 budget, but for ongoing. As I mentioned, we haven't grown in FTE in many years here at the county. There were over 100 requests for permanent employees. And it's disheartening to me to have to recommend no for those without a revenue source or without any support. So and you'll see during the recommendations, there are not many, some project positions that I'm recommending now. And then there's also opportunities that we can look at for additional revenue sources to help with those positions. Again, due to the structural deficit in the general fund and the pressures on all of our major funds, it is not feasible to recommend most of these positions. The recommendations, again, are provided for a limited number, limiting the number of new permanent positions and really looking at what can we pair it with grants or other types of revenues that we can receive. Part of our next step in our strategic look internally is looking at employee matrix and forecasting project. This is a combination project led by our HR director and our finance director. So not just doing 6-year forecasts financially, but 6-year forecasts for FTE so that we can project based on population growth, based on our services, where do we provide services? What does that look like long term? Additionally, I am recommending Baker Tilly Phase 2 There's 2 parts to the Phase 2. One is already currently started, and that's with our HR department. They're reviewing all the benefits with the county. That's not just medical, dental, and vision, but that's also time off, sick leave, paid time off. So they're doing a comprehensive review on that now. We'll be bringing back that to council because that is under your purview. The second part is updating all the job descriptions for the county to make sure that it accurately reflects the work that we're doing. There was an initial review with the Baker Tilly Phase 1 where employees did put in what they actually do, and we can use that as a baseline to update our current job descriptions. There is a recommendation in the budget today to hire a consultant to do that because we simply don't have the capacity in the HR department to conduct that work. And again, policy review will be very intentional, at least once, maybe twice a month with council starting in January. Law and justice funding request. I first want to say public safety is a top priority. I also want to share my appreciation to everybody in our law and justice system, including the sheriff's office, Superior Court, District Court, the prosecuting attorney, public defense, the clerk's office, juvenile. Am I missing anybody? I don't think so. All right. They provide county-wide services for law and justice. Some of them have been underwater for many years, including the sheriff's office, the clerk's office. We're looking at efficiencies, but we need to figure out what we're going to do to help support them in order for them to provide adequate services for our community. The number of requests that came in from law and justice departments, I'm not able to recommend all of them. There are some that I can recommend as a project position. And then what we're going to be looking at is what can we do? And part of that discussion, council's already started, and we're going to continue that discussion this afternoon at council time to see what other avenues for revenue, such as the levy lid lift, that we can capitalize on for the community. The examples of the request here are in the sheriff's office, deputies and support staff, the sheriff's office building. The specific area on that is the ongoing maintenance and operations of a building. Superior Court staffing, they did request positions such as commissioner, another commissioner, a judicial assistant. There were other requests. There was a couple in there that were already project employees that we are recommending to continue. Clerk's office staffing, the court records manager is being recommended as a project position. They also have needs for court assistants. They have not increased their court assistants with the last 2 judges that have been added to Superior Court. And then jail services staffing as well, booking and records as well as others. If council decides to go out for any sort of revenue source early next year, anytime next year, we are committed to having a special budget hearing just for that purpose. If council approves it and the taxpayers vote for it, we'll have a special budget hearing in the year. So we're not delaying any use of that. I mean, there will be some delays on when we have to send it to the state and when we start receiving revenues, but to start that process earlier, we will not be waiting until the end of the year or the next annual supplemental. Okay, general fund forecast. Over 2/3 of our county's general fund expenses are personnel related. It's salary and benefits. Our expenses continue to grow and are outpacing our revenues, which again is what we consider a structural deficit. We need to either increase our revenues or decrease our expenses. Most of our departments and offices don't have capacity to reduce our expenses. We've been doing this since I've started here many years ago now. My first budget cycle, we cut and hasn't been replenished. And so we are committed to doing this. I know like April's group in community development is working with the state auditor's office to look at lean processes and trying to maximize all avenues we can to create efficiencies. But a budget office of 4 or 5 people for this large of a budget is really small. I don't think we could cut any more out of the budget office, just as an example of that impact. So this is just a pie graph showing, so the blue is the sales tax revenue. No, property tax. Thank you. I have to get my glasses going. So that's about 41% of the revenues that come into the county is the property tax. The sales tax is the orange at 32%. In the past, the third section that's not included in those two, we just said other revenues. We have pulled out a couple specific ones based on council's prior discussions on these. So we call out the excise tax and other taxes, licenses and permitting, intergovernmental, which are like ILAs with the other local jurisdictions or state, charges for goods and services, fines, interest and other earnings. That also includes the interest earned on the general fund balance. Rents and leases are transfers and miscellaneous revenues. There are hundreds of other revenues. These are ones that have been discussed or a little bit more than the other smaller line items. The next one is just looking at our expenses. As mentioned, 2/3 of our expenses is people. The blue is the salaries. And again, I want to share my appreciation to the council for approving the Baker Tilly compensation study. I have been provided information from a lot of departments and offices where it has helped to retain and attract employees, which is what we want to do. Our benefits is 20%. Then you can see the other expense categories, which is our services, supplies, and other transfers. The general fund assumptions, these are consistent with what council has seen. They are reviewed annually. They're reviewed historically over many years. The property taxes assumptions for growth is 2.5%. The sales tax is 4.2%. If council remembers, I think it was the beginning of last year, we did a one-time bump on the sales tax to recognize that jump that we had in COVID. During COVID, but now we're back to baseline on that. So it's a 4.2%. And then we assume a 3% for salaries, 5% for benefits, 2% services and supplies. This is the general fund forecast without any recommendations. So you can see on here the fall supplemental budget that council just approved has the one time of 19.4 million and ongoing about 900,000. So that is incorporated into this. The 2024 projecting ending fund balance that's available for one-time requests is about 22.8 million. And I say one-time request because you can see we're eating into our one-time fund balance to balance ongoing, which is the pink and red numbers on the bottom of the screen. So if you see in 2026, again, this does not include any 2025 requests. The 1.7 million in 2026, we don't have one-time funding to recommend at that point. This is also a new slide that we just started sharing in the fall supplemental. This is strictly just our showing the expenses and the revenues, the operating expenses and revenues. Operating expenses in the orange and our revenues are below. So you can see it doesn't look like a huge gap on there, but 11 million is a huge gap and it grows steadily over the next 4 years. Any questions before I go on? I'm going to hit the recommendations and then we'll go over the 6-year forecast with the recommendations included. And then I'll pause at that point as well. But is there anything up to this point that council has questions on?
Is Chair Medvedi on? Not yet. Okay. Well, I just had a quick question. So on that pie chart, the 0.1, when you said there were hundreds of other sources, that's represented in that 0.11%, right?
Those categories roll up the hundreds. So it's not just that 0.1%. So for fines and fees, there can be several actual revenue sources for that. There's several revenue sources for cost of goods and services. So those are just the major categorical areas.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I have a question as well. How long have we been in this structural deficit? It's been the entire time I've been on the council, but how far back does it go?
Who's been here the longest? It predates me. Has it been, I would say more than 10 years. Yes. Okay, not hearing any other questions, so if we can go ahead. So the recommendations, so we did receive about 300 requests for the annual budget. I'm recommending 263 today for council's consideration. 18 were budget neutral, so those come with a revenue source such as grants. 27 are carry forward, which are items that council's already approved, but we have not fully spent that amount yet. Technical adjustments could be correcting coding errors or just cleaning up some work that has previously been done. So we had 8 of those. 24 previously approved, which means it's already come to council in a Tuesday meeting for your consideration and you approve that. 221 new requests. There's 2 budget interventions, which provide additional efficiencies, revenues, or cost savings. And there's 37 out of the 300 that are currently not being recommended. I'm going to go over not a lot, but some of the high points of the recommended of new requests only, and then also touch again on items that are not being recommended. There's simply too many for me to go through them all. And I will say all of this has been online for a while, and I encourage council and the community to go out and share the recommendation or look at the information out there. So for general fund, I'm going to try to hit this in some categories of major funds, which we have the forecast coming up. So for general fund, I am recommending the 1%. There is indirect cost allocations, which are part of an annual update that we do. Same with our general liability insurance and risk. We had postage increases, fleet charges, safety gear, uniforms, and vehicles for the sheriff's office, jury software upgrade for Superior Court, overtime contingency. One of the things I'm not recommending is the individual overtime right now. It's mostly for the jail, for the sheriff's office, and juvenile detention, and sometimes Superior Court. We'll keep assessing those and true them up at the end of the year to make sure that they're made whole. So this contingency just puts money aside for that future use. Supplies and utilities, that should not be a surprise. Everybody is paying a lot more for stuff when we go to the store. Utilities are increasing. We have some contract increases like with Cressa and the Humane Society. CJC, I'm recommending continuation of the project positions. It was recommended by the director to have that contingent on the City of Vancouver's approval process, and they're considering that next week during their budget hearing. Comp plan update contingency. This is for work that will be done after July of 2025. It's about $500,000. We have not heard from Commerce if they're going to have another grant opportunity like they did this year. And since the state extended that deadline through the end of the year, so it's just a contingency for staff to be able to continue to work on that project. Public defense case management database. Juvenile flood controlled toilets. I don't think I need to say more than that, but it's definitely something we need to assist for those who are housed or work in juvenile as well. Also, juvenile upgrades and expansion of the security cameras in the D-pod. There are some project positions, and again, I will say most of these, I think there was one that actually recommended a project. The rest of these were requested ongoing. The assessor, personal property appraiser, internal services, I am recommending a project purchasing person. We have literally 2.5 FTE dedicated to getting RFPs and bids out in the county. We're months behind, like we're into middle of next year to get bids out. So that slows down our ability to move forward with capital projects and stuff. So And our two FT over there have been with the county a long time, great knowledge, great people. This will also help ensure continuity if anybody decides to retire as well. But this will provide some capacity initially so we can get much needed work done quicker. The clerk's office, courts records manager. Again, I know I mentioned this already, but they have not received any increase like in the clerk's office that directly support the last two judges that were hired in Superior Court. Logistics assistants in the jail, Superior Court, a judicial assistant, OA3. These are already currently project positions and extending it for another additional 2 years. Human resources for workers' comp and risk. Okay. And I do want to share my appreciation for the treasurer's office. They are increasing general fund property tax interest revenue for $294,000. This will be adjusted annually, and it's increased again based on the general fund balance. And each fund has their own interest. So this is a general fund piece. And then the other revenue that the treasurer's office has brought forward is an increase in investment services fee revenue of $51,000. I do want to, for general fund, I am asking council I'm amending one of the recommendations, and we'll have the technical pieces for the hearing, but it's a juvenile detention officer as a project position. So that's not included in any of the costing and reports today, but will be included during our hearing. Again, items that in general fund that have not been recommended is permanent ongoing positions. And I'm just going to say it's most departments, the assessor, the clerk, the budget office, district court, our law and justice partners, including the sheriff's office, the clerk, Superior Court, juvenile, for ongoing positions. Capital items that were not critical, safety hazard, going to cause more damage, cost us more money, are not being recommended. And then, of course, I said the overtime, which is not recommended specifically for departments, but the contingency is. For mental health sales tax, there was an external and internal RFP grant allocation for the external. I'm just going to name the organizations that are being recommended. Jordan's not with us. I know a couple counselors are on that committee as well, and they can provide additional information if you have them, but it's for Girls Inc. of Pacific Northwest, Recovery Cafe, Family Solutions, Fosterful, Friends of the Children, YWCA had a couple, Therapeutic Court, and then Prevention and Early Intervention, Peer 360, Community Roots Collaborative, 4D Recovery Housing Initiative, Janus Youth Boys and Girls Club, and Lifeline Connections. We will get you more information on those so that you have that. Some of them are in the decision packages that have been submitted, but I don't have that because this is only internal stuff. So I only have the dollar amount, but if there's specific questions, we'll make sure you have a summary of those before the next meeting. And then internally, CJC to extend a subcontract as ongoing for dedicated clinician specialty training, District Court 3 positions supporting therapeutic courts, the jail medication for opioid use disorder, jail reentry program, behavioral health expansion, and juvenile legal secretary and forensic clinical psychologist request. And then just a couple more: road fund, clean water, and others. 1%. I am recommending the 1% for the road fund. Again, the indirect cost allocation, that actually hits all of our funds. The clean water rate study as approved yesterday. So before yesterday, I was recommending contingent on council approval. There are some FTEs that road fund will be paying for to support road operations. And also their capital items, which council has been hearing on the transportation improvement program, stormwater, parks that you saw yesterday, and then some capital equipment to also support the road operations. Planning and code expense capacity for permitting. They already had the budget there. They just need expense capacity. And then I do have the land use review and wetland and habitat fees. That's come before you for a work session. It is being recommended contingent on your approval. I think we're having that work session on December 2nd. So you'll be able to have that, not the work session, the public hearing on December 2nd. REIT 1 debt payment, and also includes the new bond issuance. Major maintenance, Fairgrounds Master Plan. So there is already dedicated funding from the exhibit hall, dedicated revenue. I will be inviting the CEO here at the beginning of the year to provide an update or a presentation on their master plan of what they just did. So this is supporting their master plan efforts, and the revenue is there for that. A pole building for equipment storage at 78th Street, the Dolly Building, replacing the east side exterior stairs and handicap ramp, a joint lobby, safety and efficiency remodel, and a few others. Okay. So before you now is the general fund recommendations or the forecast with the recommendations included. I'm going to focus on, I'm not going to go for each fund over operating total expenses expended at the top like I usually do, but it is on here. So I want to focus on what's being recommended and the impact it has on our fund balance. So you can see the operating budget impact. This is in the red circle. The impact is about 3 million. The general fund 1% is included in there, which is about 782,000 a year. And just as you can see, it only shows that same amount in years forward. So therefore, it does not include any future potential 1% increases. If there was another 1% next year, then next year would show, 1.5 million or something around there, a little bit more than that. And it compounds year over year. Capital one time of 3.7 million. The projecting ending fund balance for budget request that was not used in 2025 is 4.7 million. I don't recommend using all of that because as you can see, the next year, we don't have even one-time request for 2026 budget. And you can see just calling out. So the bottom pink line, again, that's the operating surplus and deficiency. So this is our structural deficit. This is showing the expenses exceeding our revenues. So it's 11.7 million. And you can see that grow over year. The pink line above that is the projecting ending fund balance. So you can see the 4.7 I just mentioned under the 2025 in the black box. Next year, there's an $8.9 million deficit. This does not include any request. This is why we need to talk about revenue options, policy direction, because it's finally upon us very quickly. We knew this was coming. And like I said earlier, finance team has done a tremendous job. If they did not come up with the bond reissuance, we would have been cutting this year. And I also want to just reemphasize too, every department and office in this county has done a tremendous job every year with trying to manage within their budget and doing the most with the limited resources that they have. It's hard to be strategic for even at a department level when you're constantly trying to figure out how to balance. So that's where our great discussions next year with council, which will include our elected offices to be part of those discussions and our department heads to figure out how we're going to work together and address this. I'm missing a slide. So this is just the same recommendations, but it does not include the 1% levy increase. So you can see the numbers at the bottom have changed. It takes out the 782,000 moving forward. And we do this because I know council in the past has asked to see both options so you can see what the impact could be. Any questions on this one before I move forward? Go ahead.
I have a quick question. If we took all of the percentages for all of those funds, how would that look? I'd be curious to see how
Yes.
that looked. And I'm thinking it's not going to cover everything, but I'd just like to see how that looks if we took everything we could possibly take.
So for general fund, meaning the 1%?
General fund and those other funds.
Yes, we will go over the other major funds. And you'll see that in the forecast for the other major funds, how that 1% or bank capacity impacts that. And then there is a summary slide at the end that says how much, yes,
Yet to come. Thank you.
go ahead.
Make a comment since that question was asked. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, sorry for joining late. It took me half an hour to sign in again. So a couple of observations and comments. One, I asked that very question, Sue, in the past, years ago. If we took every avenue of revenue increases, tax increases, how would this chart look differently? And the answer would be, it wouldn't. That's why I started tilting at the sales tax leakage, because that is a source of revenue that we know we're losing, and it's huge. We've taken the 1% before, yet this 6-year forecast doesn't look any different. So there's something fundamentally at issue here, and I don't know that if any one of you really understands what this structural deficit is. And I've been hearing it the whole time I've been on the council, and it preceded me. You know, I don't know where that 10 years came from, whether it's been 6 years or 10 years or 20 years. But, you know, the corollary to all of this is, where are we spending too much in our general fund? All of our other funds are looking pretty healthy. But this 6-year forecast has pretty much always looked the same. It's always looked dismal. It may have been, and this is the worst I've seen it, but usually it was at least a year out or 2 years out that we were going to be spending more than we had. But there's something fundamentally wrong here. And no matter what we take in the way of revenue, I mean, the easy answer is we need more revenue. We need more revenue. Let's just tax more. I don't think that's the answer. So I just raised that because I did fundamentally ask the exact same question Sue just asked. What would it look like if we took every possible tax we could? And the answer was we would still be in a structural deficit. It is not the solution to tax more. The solution is to solve this tax leakage issue, or to cut where we need to cut. I'm off my soapbox.
If I could just real quick, and I will get this information for council, because a couple years ago, I agree, Councilor Mevaji had asked about this, and we did do an analysis, and it was very significant revenue loss for not taking the 1% historically. So I will pull that up and get that out to council before the hearing.
Chair?
Michelle, are you acting as chair? I don't know. I keep.
I wasn't sure at this point. If you wanted to take back over, I can do it. Go ahead, Councilor Young.
Sure. So I agree with you in the sense that it wouldn't look different and that it would still be red, but that red number would be changed based on whether or not we had taken the 1% or whether we take it this year or not. You know, and I agree with you fundamentally that we always need to look where we can adjust our expenses to accommodate the revenue that we receive. But, you know, I have every single department and other elected saying to us, they don't have enough resources to do their job. So where would we cut?
That's exactly the question. And that's where we're at a loss, because we don't have any staff to do that analysis for us. And yes, every organization wants to grow. Every organization wants more. That's just the inherent, I mean, whether you're in the military or in the courts or in the public, a prosecutor's office, everyone wants to grow. No one has enough. That is absolutely the starting point.
I'd just like to add a comment. Actually, this does look different than the first year I came in. It looks a lot worse. And taking that 1% is not going to solve all the problems, but it compounds year after year. And we need to be looking at all the revenue sources that are available to us because, in fact, the community has grown and the needs have grown and the problems have gotten more complicated. So I think it's a disservice, and we can talk about this more as we move on, not to really look at what revenue we can take.
Chair,
Yes, Counselor Berman.
I have a question. If this were an Excel spreadsheet and we clicked on that, a live Excel spreadsheet, and we were able to click on that 12,514,000, what would be seen as the formula for getting that number?
Council Bowerman, that would be taking the ongoing operating revenues, less the ongoing operating expenses, less the approved ongoing expenses that are being recommended. So it's cumulative of all the ongoing revenues and all the ongoing expenses. And that's why it says operating surplus or deficit. If our revenues were exceeding our expenses, that would be a positive number. Since our expenses are exceeding our revenues, it's a negative number.
Which line items would that be, Emily? I'm not following on the word ongoing in the spreadsheet up here.
So at the top, you'll see there's a total operating revenue line of 198
Yes.
and the total operating expenses of 208.
Yes.
331,799. And then the ongoing, I'd have to double check the formula, but it's not going to take the impacts from 2025 because that includes many one-time. It's going to probably be taking that 2.8 million that's projected in 2026. I'd have to double check it. It takes the ongoing amount, not the one-times. But I can follow up on that specifically if you'd like and show you that formula.
I would appreciate it because that bottom line of operating surplus and deficit is so critical, and I'm just unsure as to how it's derived. So I appreciate your doing that. Thank you.
Sure.
One further clarification too. So this includes our forecast on inflation.
Yes.
Okay. But it does not include critical things such as unfunded mandates like indigent defense that we're looking at in the near future.
Right. It doesn't include things that we're not able to fund, and it doesn't include things that we don't know about.
Yep.
Kathleen, I have a question for you. Besides April's division, have other divisions or departments within the county, have they gone through an audit process or like a Lean Sigma 6 type of process to see what they could do in their different departments to save money?
The only one I'm aware of is human resources.
Okay.
I haven't
Um,
specifically asked separate electeds or the other departments. But I can tell you for the departments that work for me, it was highly recommended and encouraged for them to utilize them.
Okay.
And I know it was brought up, I think last year, and Councilor Young was the one that brought this resource to light for me. And so I know it was brought up with the electeds as well, but I don't know if they have done that.
And wasn't that a free process offered through the state?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. I think it would be worth looking into everybody going through that, especially with this forecast. That might be something that all the department heads would consider. And then also I have a question going back to the Baker Tilly Phase 2. Was that Phase 2, was that built into the Baker Tilly contract?
No.
Okay. So would the Phase 2, I'm assuming that would cost the county something to go through that? And what does that involve?
Yes, so I had mentioned there's two pieces to that. One is the review of the benefits, which we're doing internally with current staff and human resources. They don't have the capacity to do the job description review, because that is very lengthy. We have a lot of job classifications, but it's working with the department heads, the separate electeds, and then we have to bargain all of that. So it's updating all of those job descriptions, which they haven't been updated, I think, since 2013 or even earlier than that. So that request is a one-time for a project position to come in and do that work.
Do we know like a kind of a roundabout projected cost for that at all?
The recommendation is $100,000.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all I have. Any other counselors have any questions?
Yeah, just to add on to that, so whatever results come out of that are not baked into this either, correct?
No, but there's not going to be a financial impact to job descriptions. The $100,000 contract is included into this as a one-time recommendation, but the job descriptions are not going to increase our revenue, reduce expenses per se. And then the benefits but benefits increase most of the time. The more impact on the benefit side, like if we change leave, so if there's more people taking time off, that could impact service level. It also could impact cash outs if somebody leaves, if there was an increase on that. So that would be the only financial, and we do have a 5% built in for benefits already in the forecast.
Okay.
Any other questions from council? All right. Handing it back over to you, Kathleen.
Thank you. And I know I said this at the beginning, and I know Chair Babaji wasn't on, so I just want to reemphasize, we're not asking for new staff. This is really trying to maintain what we have, and that's what we've been doing since I've been here. And so I want the public to know we do take into consideration and we take the heart that they pay our salaries. And so it is on us to make sure we're being responsible. And if we had the funding, we should be increasing. We should be increasing law enforcement. We should be increasing our law and justice partners and others. We don't have the funding to do that. So I take it to heart and just want to make sure that everybody heard that same message. Okay, so for public safety sales tax, so just a reminder that this was approved by voters specifically for body worn cameras. It also included for other law enforcement and public safety increases. So this, we do not have any additional recommendations because it is fully spent out and captured. We are using it only for law and justice. The council did approve a special fund for transparency for the public because it could have gone into general fund. There is an advisory committee. They are meeting now. They're relooking at the composition of that advisory group of who's a voting member, who's just a person to be there to provide technical expertise and opinions and support. We're also looking at the fund balance policy now that it's been in place for a couple of years to make sure that that is what makes sense moving forward. I think we have a 6-year forecast. Yes. So again, this is just the 6-year forecast. So you can see that it's pretty well being used for what it should be. We do have some one-time adjustments or ongoing for this year just to update for the ongoing items that council had already approved. Mental health sales tax. So this is the program council had set up quite a while ago, and there's a mental health sales tax committee that does meet. They do internal and external RFP processes. We did see a change in COVID where we did grow a significant fund balance. Most of that was due to we did award contracts, but with the COVID restrictions, the contractors were unable to fulfill that role. So that money fell back to fund balance. I think this is probably the first time we received more funding than what we have available for this project. Oh, last year as well. Sorry. So yes, so we're
More requests.
more requests, yeah, than we've ever seen. I just want to call it here because I know just for public transparency and, for council and everybody else, that all of this, we have a good website here that can show what they've been doing. There's annual reports. The current one is for 2023 that is posted. I know Jordan's been working with our internal partners and coming up with some reporting performance metrics that we can report out on as well. So this is out there and available for the public to take a look at. So for the 6-year forecast, again, I'm just going to focus on in the red circle there. There was about 11.2 for the external grant process that is being recommended to be awarding. And then internal is about 2.3 ongoing. That leaves with a available fund balance of 4.2 million. Just going to pause for a sec before I move on and make sure there's no questions.
I think you're muted, Chair Mevaji. I see your mouth moving, but no sound.
No.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, you can. So from the external and internal and what we have for an ongoing fund balance, what do we have left? I didn't quite hear what you said. From
The
this
project-
year.
The projecting ending fund balance is 4.2 million. It's the second from the bottom.
Okay, I see it now. 4.2 million. Is that? So remind me again, what is the ongoing fund balance recommended? Says 5 million?
I think it's a formula. I don't think it's a strict dollar amount. So I don't know if Emily has that offhand.
The minimum fund balance, is that the question, Chair Medveji?
Okay, so the way I'm seeing these numbers, we still have $4 million we could spend this year.
Correct.
Is that true or not?
There's a balance of one-time $4.2 million for the fund.
Okay, yeah, I guess I'll talk to you offline because I don't understand this slide.
So to answer your question, yes, Chair, there is 4.2 million that has not been committed for 2025 budget.
Okay, that's what I'm asking. So we still have that we could allocate if we were to diverge a bit from the standard external internal review process. So like the Children's Justice Center, I understand the city is adding back their funding, and I'm assuming we are too. But if we needed money for an unfunded activity, this might be available legally because it does involve mental health support.
I would say if it falls under the parameters, and supplanting is one of them. So and I agree, I have heard that the city is reconsidering CJC. It is recommended on our end. But
Okay.
it's also contingent based on the director's request on the city. But we would have to look at that because since that's a current funding source, that could be considered supplanting. So we would have to have a review on if it
Okay.
qualifies.
Yeah, so I just wanted to highlight that for all the council and the public, that we still have some money in this fund that we could spend.
A question?
Go ahead, Counselor Barban.
Again, I have a question on the spreadsheet. The projected available fund balance, the 4.2 million that we're talking about, is that carried over to 2026? Because I'm not seeing it there.
What it does is it carries forward. If you look at 2025, the projected ending fund balance of the 9.2 million, that's what's carried forward into the 2026 forecast. In each individual year, we take, for example, 2025, that 9.2, we reduce that available for new requests by what the minimum fund balance is, which is the 5 million. And that leaves that 4.2 that could be used for new requests and still meet our requirements for our fund balance policy.
So the 9.2 million is carried over, where in the 2026?
It's the
Column.
top line under 2026.
Um,
Says it's the black,
oh, in
black
black.
line.
I
Yes,
didn't even see that black line.
yeah, that's the
So,
beginning fund balance.
so that is carried into the addition there that we can't see how it works since the spreadsheet isn't active. But that is added to the 14.4 million that comes in sales tax.
Correct. So
Somewhere.
we refresh each year. We bring that available fund balance, that projected ending fund balance up to the new year. Then we project what revenues we have expected for that year and the revenues and the expenses for that year. And any impacts from the recommendations in the same formula falls out. The projected ending fund balance is the beginning fund balance plus the revenues, less the expenses, less the modifiers. And then we reduce that amount by the minimum fund balance policy to give the amount available for new requests.
Okay, so we've got, I'm going to just use very rough numbers here, about 24 million in revenues. The 14 plus the 9 or 10 is 14. Yeah, so that's about 24 million. And then
Yeah,
we've got about 10 million in expenses.
Correct.
Then what?
In your baseline expenses, and then the recommendations for the budget this year's an additional 2.5 million of expenses.
And where is that?
It's in the blue line within the red circled area. If you're looking at
Okay.
2026.
Called the budget modifiers.
Right. Those are all of the things that are in play for the county manager to recommend and the council to finally adopt if they so choose.
Okay. So that gives, so now help me with the math. We were at about 24 million. We took out 10 million. We're going to take out another, say 3.
Yeah, that line item adds the 9.2 plus the 14.4 less the 10.3 less the 2.4. And then you have your minimum fund balance, which is reduced from the 10.8, and then you have a 4.5 balance for new requests.
Okay. Would it ever be possible when you send these spreadsheets out for us to be able to treat this as a live Excel spreadsheet?
I would be happy to review those with the council, either in one-on-ones or we could share them. I don't like to do those types of scenarios during public because there's all kinds of things can go wrong with formulas and things like that. We don't like to play with those live, but we could definitely share that with you, or I'm happy to go over it with you.
I would, if you could share it with me, that would be marvelous because I'm always trying to figure out how you come up with certain numbers. And, it's just easy if you can click on it and see.
It
So
does. It shows a path.
Yeah, I would greatly, greatly appreciate that. And, I mentioned that before with regard to the other spreadsheet as well. So I just, I would like that on all of the spreadsheets that you share so that we could just find our way through it very easily. And then I don't have to bother you with these detailed questions.
Any other questions from any other counselors? All right. Gonna get back over to you, Kathleen.
Okay, we're moving on to the next major fund, which is the road fund. So the first one does include the 1% request in here, and just I'll maybe do the quick summary. So you have the beginning fund balance of 45.8 million, our revenues of 63, expenses at 45 million. The proposed recommendations there is 4.4 or 4.5 million included in that. And then you can see the capital and items moving forward. There's a net decrease in the fund balance again of 4.46 million for 2025, which is in the red box with an ongoing about $1 million. And that leaves a projecting ending fund balance of 32.3 million. And you can see that one of the reasons why I recommend the 1% here is you can see the fund balance actually decreasing over the years in that last gray line out to 2030 down to 4.9 million. The second slide just has the same information, but without the 1%, so that council could see the difference there. It just changes the projecting ending fund balance from 32.3 down to 31.8. And then in 2030, it goes from 4.9 to 1.8. So it just, again, we just want to be good stewards and continue to provide the services. Planning and Code Fund. The net decrease here in the red box that you can see is 1.76 million for 2025. And there is a small ongoing there of 780. That leaves a 1.78 million available that was not captured in here or not spent. And part of this, the change in the 1.7 to the 780 is that's contingent on council's approval at the public hearing regarding the wetland habitat fees. So this incorporates that because I am recommending that contingent on council approval, but this does reflect that. So you can see it helps to right size it. Right now, we subsidize this fund about 1.3 million annually from the general fund. Any questions on that one before I move on? Okay, so the next one is the REIT 1, where the recommendation is 3 million for 2025 for debt fund payments. You can see there is a negative 195,000. That is not a concern. We are currently paying off the current debt, and then the new bond issuance then comes in. So it really does turn back around, and then you can see the fund balance growing over time after that. Not hearing any questions.
Question real quick.
Go ahead.
So on that one, if we see a projected growth in the fund balance, so what is the discussion around those funds?
I could just add, I do think that this fund could be used for future consideration of additional capital bonding projects. There's ways that we could probably maximize general fund dollars and other fund dollars if we used it for that purpose. There's also projects in the capital master plan that are not recommended right now because of the projections for 2025, but those will be coming forward for consideration in future years.
Thank you.
Okay, REIT 2, the part that's being recommended for 2025 is 378. And I will say, you can see that funding shifts throughout the next 6 years. That's due to projects and moving projects, like either adding some, removing some, and all that. So that's, we touched on a little bit yesterday too, I think at your public hearing, that this fund is continuing to be monitored and can be adjusted as well annually.
Let me comment once again, Chair, that acting chair. There's been so much work that's gone into rebalancing REIT 1 and REIT 2. And so the finance team as well as the managers should be particularly thanked and noteworthy, because this puts us in a much better position than we were 4 or 5 years ago, where we really had a deficit in one of the funds because we were wrongly spending it. So there's a lot of work that went into this, and it gives us more flexibility. And as Emily said on capital, taking out some debt where it will do some good, especially for the general fund. This gives us that flexibility, and it's really because of the good corrective work of Emily's team, Mark Gasway, and our current manager, that these funds are once again healthy.
Okay, so on the property taxes, we do have the experts in the room if there's any specific questions, but I'll just briefly state that the three main components to the property taxes is the levy amount, the assessed value, and the levy rate. You can see the formula there at the bottom of your screen. The council also adopts levies supporting the budget each year. Next slide, please. Different tax levies. So the general fund, including the subordinate levies of the mental health disabilities, developmental disabilities, and veterans assistance, the road fund, conservation futures, and the Clark Parks District. The Clark Parks District, you may remember from years past, is considered separately when the council convenes as the Greater Clark Park District Board, which happens the same day as our annual budget process. Again, our property taxes is stable, but our general fund is not. So we'll move on to the next slide. So this is just a summary of the recommendations on the 1% and the impact on what that looks like. So in the slide, so you can see the levy type on the side. So I'll go over the general fund first. The recommendation is 1%, which will provide about $782,000 a year. Bank capacity is not available. We took that a few years ago. The impact on a homeowner for a medium household price of $528,000 is $3.86 a year. That is the total impact that a resident with that medium home price is $3.86 a year for that 1%. The road fund is about $500,000 for 1% that we would receive. That total amount would be $2.47 per year. Conservation futures, this is the 1% and bank capacity recommendation, which both of them together would be about $443,000. And that total combined would be $2.04 a year. And then same with the MPD parks, the 1% and the bank capacity totals about $78,000 revenue to the county. And that would cost the homeowner of a $528,000 medium home price of 35 cents per year.
Chair, quick question.
Yes, Counselor Gann, go ahead.
So if I remember correctly, last year, your recommendation was not to take the 1% on the conservation futures. This year you are recommending and to take the bank capacity or is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Could you kind of expound just a little bit on
I think
that?
it's based on the work and projects coming forward. And I know Ken is here, can provide more. He might be quicker than me looking at my notes.
Thank you for the question, Counselor. Ken Lader, Public Works Director. We have shifted our structure a little bit to create the lands division separate from parks. So we do expect more activity as far as conservation futures, more proactive approach. But this really does reflect our recent Gordy Joma purchase and some of the expense associated with that, as well as developing that property, getting rid of structures that are failing and improving the roads there as well. So,
Okay, thank you.
yep.
Chair, I have a question.
Go ahead, Counselor Marshall.
Thank you. I think earlier at one of our sessions, we talked about the tax increment financing and the impact it would have and the ability to recoup some of those losses. Maybe it's not so impactful in the first few years, but I guess I just put that out there as a strategy to make sure we're not losing when there's ability to recoup some of those losses going forward.
Any other questions on this one? Okay. And I think this is almost the last slide. So this is just the subordinate levies where council has the option to adopt the flat rate or proportional rate. These are the subordinate levies again for the general fund for mental health, developmental disabilities, and the veterans assistance. Historically, the council has adopted the proportional increase. I will say if that amount does come out of the general fund, so if the council decided on the flat rate, we would have to reduce that out of our general fund, which is not included in the forecast. But this is an option for an decision for council to make. And then the next slide just shares where all the reports are on the budget website for both council and the community to go look at that. And then I think that is the end of this presentation. We're more than happy to answer questions. And I just, again, want to thank all the departments and offices for being very intentional, understanding our financial strain, but also the importance of maintaining service at a minimum, trying to maintain current service level, even if it's lower than what we should be able to do. And our finance team and everybody who's put in a lot of work. And of course, Emily and her team, this is a lot of work. It's a lot of work for the staff. And I know there's big decisions council wants to make. And I know we didn't get to have our one-on-ones this week like we normally do. We pushed this up a week because you guys are at a conference next week. But my recommendations are strictly looking at business need, financial sustainability, and the service need that we're doing and making sure that's my lens. And I appreciate council's support, and we're here to answer any questions, and we can follow up also between now and the hearing. And I would also just remind council for any amendments that you may want to make, you need to share that with your fellow councilors 48 hours in advance per the rules of procedure of the public hearing. And please, even if you don't want to do it 48 hours in advance, or you want to wait till then, if you're thinking of something, let us know so that we can help prep any documentation and run numbers for you so that we're prepared.
Do any other counselors have any comments, questions?
Chair. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Okay. I was just going to bring one thing up that I think it's important to recognize, and especially with us going through our comp plan change and the city of Vancouver specifically going through their comp plan change and how they're looking at their increase in housing and where it's looking at it. Because I don't understand how this will impact us directly, but it will. The multifamily tax exemption program that they have, we did some quick numbers, and it's looking like it currently is affecting our general fund about $500,000 a year. But dependent on how they build out in the city of Vancouver, if the majority of their growth is built in an area that's eligible for multifamily tax exemption, that may significantly impact the general fund. So I think we should do our due diligence to look at that program and see how it does impact the county. Whether or not we do anything with that, I don't know, but I think the impact currently is unknown and it should be looked into.
Any other questions from council?
Yes.
Go ahead, Councilor Gardner.
I just, again, have to restate that the incredible detail and close look at our budget is just so appreciated. You've done such a terrific job. And I can't speak for all of the constituents, but for a lot of them and for our own family, thank you, because you've just done a terrific job. There is one other factor that I'd like to have you help us take a look at. And that is from the perspective of the individual property owner of that median household, who owns that median household. What is going to be the total impact? You gave it to us with about $9 of the property tax. Of what if we took that slide right there? I think it's about $9. What if we had the 1% on the road tax and the various ones? If you would add to that the known and proposed increase in subordinate levies and in clean water anything else that you see is going to impact the amount collected from our residents. I'd like to see what is the number now and what's it going to be for 2026. And I think all of us, as we make decisions on the 1%, would like to know that, because just the 1% alone doesn't tell the story. There may be other hidden expenses that are going to come along from the other jurisdictions that maybe we're not aware of and should be. So if there's anything like that that is coming forward, if you could add those in as well. And that is another part of that incredible transparency that you offer. And thank you for that.
Chair, thank you. I just wanted to thank you for that. I think that's an excellent idea. I think it's important for us to keep the cumulative impacts in mind.
So I'd like to kind of I'm not going to restate what I said before. I'll stick with it, but I just want to, I don't want this to come out and sound so dour, but it probably will. It is so easy to continue to push this structural deficit and raise reflexively the 1% across the board on everything we can in bank capacity. That's the easy solution. There is something fundamentally wrong here, where our population keeps growing. Our population keeps growing, our tax base keeps growing. And oh, by the way, and the assessor did a great job a few years ago, one of his subordinates, in showing us where our property taxes have increased. Because there's this other narrative, oh, it's only a cup of coffee for your medium household raise when you raise the 1%. If you go back 15 years, 20 years on that median home, property taxes have more than doubled. We have some of the highest taxes in the country. One, because of assessments. Just ask those people that just got their letters. I'm one of them. Our property taxes keep going up every year, whether you raise the 1% or not, because of assessments. That's the adjustment for inflation to some extent. There is something fundamentally wrong when we keep talking about a structural deficit for decades. And it is fundamentally that we're spending too much in certain areas, and we don't know where that is. Everyone wants to grow. So I'm just pointing that out because the 1%, taking it reflexively every year in every capacity, is not going to solve that 6-year projection. Because we maximize expenses, we minimize revenue. That's just what accountants do. And everyone wants to grow. So in reading all the comments on Nextdoor about why Prop 4 is failing for the city, you know what? There's a lot of different threads, but one of the telling threads is I can't afford taxes now. I'm not going to pay more. Yes, we want more public safety, but I can't afford the taxes that we have now. Clark County is pushing us out of the market as renters and property owners. That's just a common thread. So when the last point I want to make is, you know, the city put out a press release on Prop 4. I think one of the telling missing messages there is what we need to focus on as a county and all the cities. Collaboration. So we all want public safety. That is our fundamental duty. We need to invest in our sheriff's office, our jail, our courts, our prosecutor's office, and public defense. It's all one system that we fundamentally need to resource at the appropriate level. And we have fallen way behind. So what was missing in the public release from the city of Vancouver didn't mention any of the aspects of the collaboration that is now ongoing in the law and justice sector. You know, the impact that Prop 4 would have had on the courts, on the PA, on the sheriff's office, you name it. None of that collaboration was done ahead of time. And unless that 16-member committee that the city had was made up of people from the courts and the PA's office and the public defender system, on the clerk's office, you name it, they're not collaborating. And that's the failure of Prop 4. The total bill was not known to the taxpayer. So we all need to do better at that. And I think the process that's going on right now is the right process, because as a council, we really need to support our sheriff. He is so far behind in the number of deputies he needs right now. We need to find that money. And if it means cutting somewhere else, then that's what we need to focus on. You can continue to raise property taxes and all other taxes everywhere. You're not going to solve that structural deficit as long as we have tax leakage. So anyway, I know that's uncomfortable for people to hear, and to some extent, Glenn Young was right when he said, well, if we take the 1%, it'll just make the numbers look less worse in the future. Yeah, that's true. But that's not the solution. The solution is to find out what is causing the structural deficit and then make the cuts that we need to make. Because with a growing, healthy population, we should not have a structural deficit. And I would still opine that I think the fundamental cause is the tax leakage. Washington State's taxation system does not work for Clark County because we're right next door to a no sales tax jurisdiction.
Chair?
Yes, Council Murphy, go ahead.
Yes, I just have a specific question and then a comment. I believe last time we got briefed on the sales tax leakage, it was much less than I anticipated. What are we looking at actually right now for sales tax leakage?
I'm going to ask Mark because he's one provided that number. And while he's coming up here, I agree, sales tax leakage is a piece of it. So is not taking the 1% historically. And the other piece I think we need to keep in mind is we provide services in an urban area. Most counties don't do that. Most counties shrink and cities grow. So, and we don't get the same revenue as a city, even though we're responsible for those services. So.
Good points. Thank you.
Okay, Mark.
Here's Mark.
Is it on? It's on now. I believe I updated the estimate that we use, and again, it's not a scientific formula. It's based on retail sales per capita. And I believe the last update, our estimated sales tax leakage was between 4 and 6 million, which is down significantly from 5 or 6 years ago when it was up around the 10 to 12 mark. So because of factors and purchasing habits, online purchasing, things like that, it has come down significantly. So
Thank you for that. Well, we'll be having more discussions about all of this, but I too want to thank Emily, really all of the departments and the county manager worked so hard to put all of this together. We've got some hard decisions going forward, and we'll work on those together. So thanks so much.
Go ahead, Chair. I can't hear you.
So years ago, actually,
Here.
Oh, we can't hear you.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Mark, this is a follow-on question to you. So about 6 years ago, when we first started on this quest, the high-end estimate was about $25 million. And my question to you was, or is, I know you excluded King County just because of the vastness of that county. 6 years ago, did we include King County? If you included King County, what would be the minimum bottom? You know, not the 4 million, but wouldn't it be much higher if you included King County in your calculations?
Push your button.
I'm not doing well there. I try to be consistent. So whatever I've done recently was what I did on the previous forecast as well. So I believe because King County is such an anomaly based on the other large counties, it was excluded. So, and the number that you're referring to might have been, I'm not sure where the 25 million came from, but it might have been something else. But if I recall, the last time I updated it, it was more like 10 to 12, which was probably right before the COVID period. And so that's what I recall anyway. I can go look if you'd like me to. So.
Well, so I guess to focus that question, I'm curious, what would the number look like if you actually included King County and didn't treat it as an anomaly? And the strategic point is, even if you take the bare minimum where we've floored out now at your latest projection, it's still about $4 million of loss a year to our general fund. It eclipses all other taxing amounts.
Chair, just would like to make one comment.
Go ahead, Council Young.
I think it's important with this discussion, to recognize that if we approve all of these things, the impact is going to be around $9 a year. Doesn't matter if everybody's property valuations go up 50%, still going to be that. Still going to be $9 a year. Some people might pay 10 or 11 and some people 8 because their valuation goes up higher than a different area of the county. That's possible. But in whole, doesn't matter how much the property valuation goes up. We are going to be taxing people around $9 a year, increased over last year.
Any other comments from the council? Questions? All right. Anything further, Kathleen?
Not right now. We'll see you at 1.
All right. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.